The UTS Connected Intelligence Centre, known as KIC, uses data science to provide insights for many groups at UTS. KIC is home to world-class researchers working in close partnership with faculties to develop innovative data science solutions that improve feedback to students and educators. One example is KIC's work with the UTS Faculty of Health.
KIC is an interesting centre for the university. We're not actually in a faculty, we work right across the university with all the different faculties, and we provide data science consulting, and we develop software tools that help these staff and students make the most of all the data that's in the university. Here at UTS, we are particularly interested in preparing our students for the real world. That means we are very interested in experiential learning. It's one thing to learn about stuff by reading it in books, having a lecture, studying online, but especially when we talk about healthcare, you've got to be able to do it under pressure. That's why simulations are so powerful, and that's why UTS is one of the leading institutions using simulations in this way. We're working with the health faculty to invent the next generation of these simulation wards, and these wards become aware of what the student nurses are doing when they work in teams around these beds.
KIC and the health faculty have developed an advanced prototype which has been piloted with staff and students over several years as part of a joint research project. The heart of the project they've been investigating is how to keep track of everything going on in a busy simulation session.
Simulations are commonly run in classrooms like this one, in which multiple students divided in groups are working in around the patients. Therefore, many things are happening. For the teacher, it's really hard to understand, to realize what's happening in each team.
When you're teaching back-to-back lab classes all day, you get to each debrief and it can actually, they just blur together. So it can be really difficult to keep it clear in your mind which groups did well, which groups didn't do well, and be able to sort of list and discuss, all of the things that have occurred in that time space.
So this is where tracking technology is much better than a human observer. And it can also generate useful timelines and visualizations that help the students and their tutors reflect afterwards on what went well and what could be improved.
So these kinds of visualisations also mean students can have the opportunity to witness and learn from each other's disasters and triumphs, and in a visual way, and I think that this goes beyond the debrief conversation.
This leads to students moving away from a superficial learning to a deep learning experience.
What these technologies provide is much more detail, much more granular analysis of what's going on. So we can see where the communication was occurring, we can see where various team members were working around the bed space, and we can provide some feedback on what went really well and what could be improved in the future.
To create the technology, KIC have united a mix of software and hardware that work together to create the visualizations. Gloria from the KIC team explains what is used and how it's used.
First thing we need to validate when we set the lab or the simulation lab is the classroom. We need to validate the dimensions of the classroom in order to set anchors. Anchors are the technology we use to track students while they are moving around the classroom. So the next thing we set on students are bracelets. There are like fitness bracelets that help us to understand different measures like heart rate or EDA information, which is the endothermical activity, which in a general way is what your skin could tell us about different situations like temperature, sweating, and other kind of measures. The next thing we do normally is to set microphones or cameras, because we also need some support as video, for example, and audio in order to know what the students are talking about.
The technology can also track equipment that can be vital to the successful treatment of a patient by using tracking tags.
We can validate how they are moving these. For example, trolleys. We can know if they are moving around the bed, the trolley, and that kind of things.
These kinds of resources are fantastic for being able to objectively discuss performance. So in the case of, say, a CPR scenario, you might notice, with everything that's going on, you might notice that it took a long time for the defibrillator to be brought to the patient and attached and that first shock to be delivered. But with this kind of resource, I can actually say to the students during the debrief, now look at this timeline here. It took 7 minutes for from the time the patient collapsed to the time that the defibrillator was attached and that first shock was delivered. Then we can sort of discuss in a meaningful way, what does this mean for the patient?
When we are gathering data from all these different sources, the mannequin, the students, the equipment they're using, that's a lot of information. And what we have to do is find a way of making that clear and understandable. And that's where really well-designed visualizations are important. So there's a lot of information. What are we going to focus on? Where are the important bits to spend our valuable time reflecting and discussing on? That's the art of good user interface design and good visualization design. And really we want to tell a story with these timelines and with these networks and the other visualizations we're using. What is the story here that the student needs to understand? This project is a great example of how the Connected Intelligence Centre works closely with educators to give them new insights into their teaching, and also with students to give them an unprecedented level of personalised feedback in their education here at UTS.